Warman Cranberry, a young keeper of a now decrepit lighthouse on the coast of Dilsark, met his untimely fate through unfortunate circumstances, albeit strange ones. A heavy mist had rolled in on the craggy shores, and the sea was practically invisible under its shroud. As on every other night, nights akin to this one especially so, Warman ascended to the multi-story staircase to the beacon and ignited its light, shining pillars of light down onto the treacherous waters. This was a job for which Warman was highly qualified and experienced. Over only a decade, 30 years of age at the time of his death, and with much knowledge regarding safety standards, it is surprising and somehow eerie that his death came to him by way of tumbling from the top of the flight of stairs and not stopping until reaching the ground floor. His pummeled remains would have been unidentifiable if not for the fact that he was the only person who had recently inhabited the lighthouse. The word recently is an accurate modifier in this scenario, for the lighthouse is very old. Constructed in the late 19th century, the Dilsark lighthouse was originally surrounded by a clutch of smaller houses inhabited by simple but peaceful townsfolk. Not only this, but the town, at first called Dill's Arch, so called because of a seaside arch carved into the coastal crag. The name comes from the mad founder of the town. Dylan Harrington was formerly a moderately popular centre of commerce, producing reasonable but not exceptional amounts of seafood. Dylan Harrington, a hideous man with a low brow and a soft nose, and dull eyes which were almost red, commissioned the construction of the lighthouse at the highest peak of Dill's Arch. This, of course, was highly reasonable. Ships returning to port would indubitably need a beacon to guide them safely through the dangerous waters. What was not expected was the unnecessary construction of a deep concrete neck extending from the lighthouse's base under the ground and leading to a circular chamber. In the time, citizens of Dill's Arch began to disappear without a trace. At the same time, the remaining inhabitants became increasingly uneasy at Dylan Harrington's wild vagaries. Oftentimes he could be sighted creeping as if in a daze from street to street at midday. At dusk he retreated to his lighthouse and screamed from a high window in a voice that was only vaguely reminiscent of human vocal patterns. Despite his unpredictability, Dylan Harrington maintained his humanity by frequently engaging in polite conversation with passers-by while aimlessly lurking. Notably, those whom he spoke to tended to vanish in the following days. A mob of terrified citizens, those who hadn't vacated the town that is, eventually surrounded the Dill's Arch lighthouse and demanded entry, only to be verbally assaulted and threatened by the undeniably lunatic Harrington within the heavy walls of the lighthouse. In time, the townsfolk managed to tear away the front door and ploughed inside, discovering that Harrington was nowhere to be found. However, a particularly keen citizen noticed a crooked floor panel. Sure enough, upon peeling it away, the mob uncovered an immensely deep passage leading into interminable depths of darkness. A brave few descended the creaky wooden ladder, returning minutes later as impossibly disturbed beings. They never spoke of what they found in that damnable chamber, but it is known that they returned with cold blood staining up to their shins. In modern times, Dilsark is a dead town with a dead lighthouse. Ships no longer sail into port, and all visits are rare and only with one purpose: to witness the so-called Phantom Light. Years after Warman Cranberry's death, the lighthouse had fallen into a state of disrepair, and currently has no keeper to speak of. However, that has apparently not kept the beacon from igniting every now and then, with no evident cause. It shines as it always used to, with vast pillars of light falling onto the ravenous sea, but only shines periodically throughout the night. When infrequently it shines periodically between on and off, and then dulls completely for another randomly given amount of time. Logic dictates that this should be impossible, not only because there is no keeper, but also because electricity has been disconnected from the dead town for 5 years. Tourists assume by legendary that the spirit of Warman Cranberry is to blame, and several of them have snapped photographs of the lit beacon in an attempt to capture a ghostly figure, and many have succeeded. although the figure's features have always been indistinguishable from such distance. Camera hanging from a loose cord around my neck, I rammed open the locked door and stumbled into the dark. A musty odour wafted into my nose, reminiscent of old times and strange incidents. Once my eyes adjusted to the dark, I ventured farther into the abandoned lighthouse. Every step I took forward, the spiral steps creaked uncomfortably and in more than one place. I felt the wooden floor sagging into a passage, but it held me well enough. Step by step up the stairs, I can imagine the noises that must have been made when Warmond had his fall. The rapid clanging of flesh and bone on metal, coupled with his grisly screams, and the final crushing impact of his skull against the hard plaster wall at the edge of the steps. The thought made me shiver, but drove my morbid curiosity and encouraged me to ascend with a nervously pounding heart. I was here for one reason: to snap a photograph of the beacon room while lit, to discern the features of a woman's spirit. A trap door was at the top of the steps, latched flimsily down. I placed my hands against it and pushed my whole body upward, bending the wood and provoking creaking and cracking sounds. As soon as I did so, there came another less expected sound, racing footsteps above me. For a moment I stumbled back a bit, listening for any further disturbances. When I confided that there were none, I attempted again my forcing of the trapdoor. All at once it gave way, and I threw myself into the blinding beacon room. A chilling breeze surrounded my body for a number of seconds, but then it quickly dissipated. I paid no attention to it, too obsessed with starting up my camera and finding a good vantage point where I could snap a photograph. With haste, I pressed my back against the glass facing away from the beacon and pointed my camera towards the light. Pressing the little black button, I captured a picture of not only the beacon, but the trapdoor beside it. But something was dreadfully wrong. There did stand in the picture an apparition, but it was not alone, nor was it Woman Cranberry. There were two phantasmic apparitions, and the one standing was a markedly ugly man with a low hairy brow and a flat squishy nose. The other apparition, being thrown down the steps by the former, was an unmistakable Woman Cranberry. I stared, shaking, as I realized who the former was: Dylan Harrington. The realization was accompanied by the sudden dying of the beacon, and I was immersed in darkness. A sudden coldness overwhelmed me, and I listened in terror as the trap door slammed shut.